That's why at the end of the verse, what does it say? It says, أَفَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. Will they not believe? The verse is saying there's something here that should lead you to believe that it's from God. But there's something even more amazing. I want to tell you about an amazing verse in the Quran. This verse says that the heavens and the earth used to be joined together and that God then split them open. This isn't a new interpretation. It's an ancient interpretation. It goes back to the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is God's cosmos. There was a young companion, his name is Ibn Abbas. He's considered to be the most knowledgeable of all the companions in tafsir, in explaining the meanings of verses. He said that this verse means that the heavens and the earth were joined, they were one thing, and that God then raised up the heavens and He lowered the earth. In other words, He moved them apart from each other. In other words, He expanded the space in between them. That's exactly what the Big Bang tells us.
That's amazing.
Absolutely is.
Are there other interpretations of this verse?
Yes. There's another interpretation that says that the verse isn't saying that He split them open, but that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cracked open the heaven so that rain came down, and He cracked open the earth so that plants would come out of the ground.
But the sky doesn't crack open when it rains.
That's right, it doesn't. Previously, some people used to believe this, and perhaps some scholars, they had this in mind when they interpreted the verse this way. But now, when scholars, they interpret the verse in this way, they interpret it figuratively. They say that the cracking open of the sky refers to the flashes of lightning when it rains. And the cracking open of the earth, it's the literal cracking open, plants coming out of the ground. They have an argument for this, because if you continue the verse, after it talks about the heavens and the earth being joined together and then cracking open or splitting open, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ أَفَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. We made out of water every living thing. Won't they then believe? So they say that since the end of the verse is talking about water and life coming about from water, it makes sense for the beginning of the verse to be talking about the falling of rain.
That seems to make sense.
It does at first glance, but not if you look more closely. There's actually many other verses that mention rain immediately after the creation of the heavens and the earth. It's there in Surah Qaf, it's there in Surah An-Nazi'at, other places too. And it makes sense because the purpose of creating the heavens and the earth is life, particularly human life. And human life is not possible without water. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here that we made every living thing from water. It makes sense. Did you know that scientists are now searching for extraterrestrial life on other planets outside our solar system? These are called exoplanets. And they want to search for life. How to do that? It's a scientific problem. But there's one thing that they need to find. Otherwise, they're going to conclude that there's no life on the planet. They have to find water. If there's no water, it means no life.
So even scientists peering back into the origin of the universe are looking for water.
Yes, and that's a very practical illustration of why mentioning the creation of the heavens and the earth is consistent with mentioning life and water at the end. This is the interpretation that Ibn Abbas gave. He understood it, and he's the greatest interpreter of the Quran. It's from the companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's also a literal interpretation. The competing interpretation is a figurative interpretation because the sky doesn't literally crack open. And we have a rule of exegesis that says that when the literal interpretation is possible, you always go with the literal interpretation. You don't go to the figurative interpretation unless there's a need to go there. And if you read this verse in light of what we've seen in previous episodes, we've seen that verses in the Quran that talk about the universe, the beginning and evolution of the universe, consistently, they mention things that we only discover in the future. We saw in the previous episode the expansion of the universe. Before that, we talked about the verse that mentions how unimaginably huge the universe is. In that same episode, we looked at the verse that says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show people in the future things in the heavens, in the horizons, that will show them that the Quran is from God. It makes complete sense. It fits with these other verses. For this verse to also be talking about a scientific fact that we've only recently discovered, if God is the author of the Quran and He's the one who created the universe, it makes sense for Him to describe the universe as it really is. That's why at the end of the verse, what does it say? It says, أَفَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. Will they not believe? The verse is saying there's something here that should lead you to believe that it's from God. But there's something even more amazing.
What's that?
If you look at the verse, it talks about sight. It says, أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. Yara means see. The verse is saying, won't the disbelievers see? It's urging them, spurring them to investigate, to discover, to see with their eyes that the universe used to be joined together and then it was split open.
How can we see something that happened billions of years ago, though?
Exactly. That's why many classical mufassirun, exegetes, they said that see here means no. Don't they know? That happened sometimes in the ancient Arabian language. But if you look at the key discovery that led to the Big Bang, it's all based on sight. In 1929, Edwin Hubble discovered something called a redshift. We need a quick physics lesson. If you take the elements in the periodic table, hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, you put them in gas form and you pass light through them, then there's certain wavelengths of light that will be absorbed. If you take the light that goes through these gases and then afterwards you split it open with a prism and you examine all of the colors, you'll find black lines. These black lines are the wavelengths of light that were absorbed. They're called spectral lines. Every element in the periodic table has its unique pattern of spectral lines. This is what Edwin Hubble did. He took the light that was coming from the galaxies and the stars far away and he split it open. And he looked at the spectral lines and he found the elements. He found the pattern for hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, other elements. He found them, but he saw that they're all shifted towards the red end of the spectrum. That's why it's called red shift. The red end of light, wavelengths there are longer. Towards the blue end, they're shorter. So what's happening is that the light that's coming to us from these faraway galaxies, the wavelength is getting longer. That means that the light is getting stretched. It's getting stretched. That means that those galaxies, those stars are moving away from us. That means that the universe is expanding. And if you wind back the clock of time, yesterday it was smaller, before that it was smaller, and you keep on going until you get to the Big Bang. So the discovery of the Big Bang is based on something that is seen. So some people like physics. For them, if they review their physics a little bit, that will make sense. Others don't. That's okay. That's the only thing you need to take away. The only thing you need to take away is that all of this is only possible based on sight. There's something else really amazing that comes out of here. Light is part of something called the electromagnetic spectrum. The electromagnetic spectrum is huge. Radio waves, microwaves, ultraviolet, infrared. and there's only a very tiny portion of the electromagnetic spectrum that human beings are able to see. We can only see a tiny portion. And these spectral lines, the wavelengths of light that these elements absorb, they're found in the visible portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. It's as though God placed these lines there so that we could see them, so that we could discover the expansion of the universe, so that we could discover the Big Bang, so that we could see that God exists. And it's all based on sight. And that's why when you look at this verse, when it says, أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, won't the disbelievers see? It's just perfect. Who is it saying that will discover the Big Bang?
The disbelievers.
Yes. And the Big Bang was in fact discovered by non-Muslims, people who don't believe that the Quran is from God. And that's why this verse, when it speaks to them, and it is speaking to them, it's indirectly, it's saying, won't they see? It has such a powerful effect. It's saying, won't those who don't believe in God and that the Quran is from God, the maker of the universe, won't they see? Don't they see that the heavens and the earth used to be joined together, and then we split them open, and now they see it? It's literally based on sight. And we made from water every living thing. أَفَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ, and it ends by saying, won't they then believe? I think it's really clear that this verse is talking about the Big Bang. But atheists and Christian missionaries, when they hear Muslims say this, then they say no. They say this verse has been copied from ancient creation myths that were circulating in the Middle East, like the ancient Egyptian creation myths, like the ancient Sumerian creation myths, like others. The atheists say that all of these myths, they also say, like the Quran, that the heavens and the earth were separated from each other, so the Prophet took from them. They don't have any evidence that the Prophet did this. They just assume that he must have done that without bringing any evidence that that's what he did. Now let's ignore the fact that the Prophet ﷺ was illiterate, that the ancient Arabians who he lived with were illiterate, and that he had no access to Jewish and Christian scriptures, let alone the myths of the ancient Egyptians. Let's ignore that for a moment and assume, let's go along with this objection and assume that he took this verse from the myths of ancient Egypt and ancient Sumeria. These myths don't just mention that the heavens were separated from the earth, they also mention other details that are unscientific and incompatible with modern Big Bang cosmology, such as the seas and the mountains, or even snakes pre-existing the heavens and the earth. Does it make sense for the Prophet ﷺ to take this verse from those myths, just the part about the heaven being separated from the earth, but take out all of the inaccuracies and leave the verse so that it fits so amazingly with what we know about the Big Bang and how it was discovered, all on his own? No, it doesn't. He needed to have been taught by someone who knew these things. And if that were God, the creator of the universe, it would make a lot of sense. In fact, it would also help us make sense of the mention of the creation stories in other religious texts. The parts of them that correspond to the Quran, such as the separation of the earth from the heavens, these would be remnants of previous revelations that God sent to prophets in those lands, in ancient Egypt, in Sumeria, in Babylon, because Allah tells us in the Quran that messengers were sent to every group of people. And the unscientific parts that we now find with this idea of the heavens and the earth being separated from each other, these are all corruptions by the hands of men, corrupt priesthoods later on. And the Quran is restoring what's mentioned in those texts to their original form. And that restoration is amazing, even miraculous. And it does that with the Bible too, and that's what we're explaining in this series. But there's something else too. The Quran is different from every other religious text because it doesn't just tell us about the universe. It also tells us to look at what it's saying about the universe and it says, won't they then believe? أَفَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ? No other religious text speaks like this. Only the Quran does. It's drawing attention to the fact that it contains knowledge that the Prophet ﷺ could not have had. And even if someone doesn't want to accept that this verse is being scientifically accurate in an amazing way, even if someone thinks it's just a coincidence, when you see the amazing accuracy in the verses about the vast size of the universe, the verses about the expansion of the universe, I talked about this in the previous 2 episodes, and many, many other verses, then there comes a point when you have to see that in the Quran, the universe is being described by someone who knows how it really is. And it would make a lot of sense for that to be God. And that only happens in the Quran. It doesn't happen in the Bible. It doesn't happen with any other religious text. They always end up contradicting Big Bang cosmology, and that's evidence that they've been corrupted by the hands of men.
So you've shown that the Bible contradicts the Big Bang. And that's why the Christians can't stay consistent when using the Big Bang to prove their beliefs that God exists.
Yeah.
But we as Muslims can. You've shown this.
Yeah, because the verses, they talk about the Big Bang. And, we've actually been using the fact that the universe began to exist as evidence for the existence of God for a really long time. There's something called the Kalam cosmological argument. Kalam is Muslim theology.
Let's talk about that next time.
Let's do it. If you like this episode, then check out my Why Islam is True course, in which I teach you 4 rational arguments that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself used to show that Islam is true. Learning on YouTube is great, but if you want to reach a learning goal, a learning destination, like how to make rational arguments, how to think critically as a Muslim, how to engage with modern science as a Muslim, then you need to follow a map that's been specifically designed to take you to your learning goal, step by step, through a series of carefully designed learning objectives and learning activities that take you to your final learning destination. That's how this course has been designed. This course shows you the what, the why, and the how. It shows you what we believe as Muslims. It shows you why those beliefs are based on evidence and 100% true based on Quranic rational arguments. And it shows you how to use those arguments to address common objections against Islam by atheists and others on topics such as evolution, the problem of evil, the age of Aisha, and much more. It consists of 20 modules, and it includes bi-weekly live sessions with me, pre-recorded lessons with 81 bite-sized videos, 247 application activities and real-world scenarios, a 24/7 community where you can ask a question and get it answered within 24 hours, and there's an option to buy a course textbook as well. Find out more at www.whyislamistrue.com/course and learn why Islamic seminaries are adopting this course as part of their curriculum to train the next generations of scholars. This course is actually the first and prerequisite course in the Basira classical curriculum in modern context, a 4-year curriculum consisting of 31 courses that will teach you everything that a Muslim needs to know about their deen and be ready for modern society. This 4-year Basira seminary curriculum is based entirely on the Muslim scholarly tradition, but it teaches you how to apply that tradition to the world in which we live, and it's taught completely in English. Why Islam is True is the first course in that 31-course curriculum. Check it out at www.whyislamistrue.com/course.